You know, my friends, when I was your age, 40 or 50, I never worried much about this prostate thing. I thought it was just another body part like many others. But let me tell you how I learned about its importance. Since today, at my well-lived 73 years, I better understand how our body works. It all started when my doctor, Dr. Johnson, a very attentive young man who has been treating me for years, explained it in a way that even I, with just elementary school education, could understand. He took a small orange and said, "Mr. Tom, imagine this orange is the size of your prostate. Seems small, doesn't it? But it's fundamental to our health." And then he explained to me, with all the patience in the world, that this gland is like a tiny factory that produces a special fluid. I immediately remembered my old profession as a mechanic. I worked 40 years fixing cars. It's like engine oil, you know? Just as oil protects and helps the engine work better, this fluid that the prostate produces helps protect and transport those important cells for having children. In my youth, nobody talked about these things. But today, I understand that this gland works like a little hydraulic pump, helping to push this fluid out at the right time. It's like when we squeeze a toothpaste tube. You need that force for the paste to come out, right? Dr. Johnson also explained to me that the prostate helps control our body's hormones. It's like a car's thermostat, that part that controls the engine temperature. The prostate helps keep everything functioning at the right temperature, so to speak. I remember when he explained all this to me, I was impressed how such a small thing could be so important. It's like that tiny valve in a car engine. If it doesn't work properly, the whole car can stop. That's why, my friends, today I tell my children and grandchildren, don't do what I did in my youth. Don't neglect your health just because you think you're too young to worry. It's like car maintenance. If you only look for the mechanic when the problem is already big, it becomes much harder to solve. And you know what else I learned? That we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about this. In my day, it was all taboo. Nobody talked about these things. Today, with my life experience, I see how wrong that was. It's a part of our body like any other, and we need to know about it to take better care of it. Now, whenever I meet my friends for Sunday dominoes, I make sure to remind them about the importance of getting checkups. As my late mother used to say, better safe than sorry. You know I like to be frank, so I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me about 15 years ago when I was around 58. At the time, I had just separated from my first wife, Mary. God rest her soul. I spent almost a year alone without any kind of intimate activity, if you know what I mean. At first, I thought it was good. Ah, Tom, now you're going to rest, I thought to myself. But let me tell you what happened next, because this might help you understand better about our health. It started with an annoying discomfort. I felt a weird weight down here, as if I was carrying a bowling ball between my legs. At first, I did what every stubborn man does. I pretended it was nothing, but it got worse. When I went to the bathroom, it felt like I was passing sandpaper through my urethra, that little tube where urine comes out, as the doctor explained to me. One night I was playing cards with my buddy Mike, and I had to go to the bathroom 5 times. He, having gone through this before, gave me a big lecture. "Tom, that's prostate congestion. If you don't take care of it, you'll end up like I did, hospitalized with prostatitis." That's when I learned about this prostate congestion thing. Dr. Johnson explained to me that it's like a clogged water tank. You know when water stays still for too long and starts to create sludge? Well, it's more or less what happens to our prostate when we go too long without activity. And there's more. He explained to me that this prostate inflammation, prostatitis, can happen in 2 ways, either because of bacteria, like when we get an infection, or simply from the accumulation of this fluid that the prostate produces. It's like a clogged pipe. If the water doesn't pass through, it's going to create a problem. I got scared when he talked about future risks. He said that if we don't take proper care, the prostate can grow. They call this benign prostatic hyperplasia, a complicated name that means the prostate got bigger than normal. It's like that little belly we develop when we don't exercise, but on the inside. And the worst part, he mentioned cancer. At that moment, I froze. I had lost my older brother, Bill, to this problem. According to the doctor, it's one of the leading causes of death among us men. That's when I decided to change my life. I remember leaving the office that day with a mission. I was going to take better care of my health. I talked to my kids about it. At first it was difficult, of course, but it had to be done. My oldest son even joked, "Dad, are you telling me you need to keep the factory running?" We laughed together, but that was exactly it. That's why, my friends, today I say, don't be ashamed to talk about this with your doctor, with your children, with your friends. It's our health that's at stake. As the saying I invented goes, idle prostate, trouble on the road. I'm going to tell you something I learned at 73, but wish I had known earlier. After that scare I had with prostatitis, Dr. Johnson explained to me that we need to keep our factory running regularly. It's like a car, it can't stay parked for too long or it rusts. You know, in my youth, nobody talked about these subjects. Everything was a sin, everything was wrong. But the doctor explained to me that it's like exercising. Our body needs this activity to stay healthy. He used a comparison that I thought was very good. It's like a faucet that needs to be opened from time to time, so the water doesn't stay stagnant and create problems. It reminded me of the time when I had a small farm. There was a water pump that, if it stayed idle for too long, would cause problems. I needed to turn it on regularly to keep everything working well. With our body, it's the same thing. It needs this preventive maintenance, as we used to say in the workshop. The doctor explained to me about something called DHT, a hormone that, when it gets too high, can make the prostate grow. He said that regular activity helps control this hormone. It's like controlling the tire pressure in a car. It needs to be always regulated, neither too high nor too low. An interesting thing I learned is that this regular activity can even help prevent cancer. The doctor explained that it's like a natural cleaning system for the body. You know, when we give a good flush to the car's radiator to remove all the dirt? It's more or less like that. I remember I had a neighbor, Mr. Wilson, who always said, better to prevent than to remedy. And how right he was. Today I understand that taking care of health is not just taking medicine when you're sick. It's doing maintenance before the problem appears. Some people get embarrassed to talk about this, but I learned there's nothing wrong with it, it's health. As my granddaughter, who's a nurse, says, "Grandpa, the body is a machine. All its parts need to work." One thing I noticed over time is that when we keep up this regular maintenance, it becomes easier to notice when something isn't right. It's like when you know your car well. At the first little strange noise, you already know something's wrong. Dr. Johnson always says that many problems men have in old age could be avoided if they had taken better care of their health from a young age. That's why today, in chat circles with my domino friends, I always speak openly about this. Some get embarrassed, others laugh, but then they come to ask for more details in private. As I always say, the shame is getting sick from lack of care, not taking care of your health. And you can write down what I'm saying. Those who take good care live better and with more energy. You know, my friends, one of the most important things I learned in this long journey is that our body and our mind are like an old couple. They need to be in harmony for everything to work out. I'll tell you a story that happened to me a few years ago, which made me understand this better. After I became a widower from my second wife, Betty, may God rest her soul, I fell into a terrible sadness. I spent a few months not wanting to leave the house, with no energy for anything. That's when I started to feel problems I had never felt before. My body was telling me something, but I wasn't paying attention. One day during my shower, I noticed I was different. I felt a discomfort I had never felt before. At first, I was too embarrassed to even talk to my doctor about it. But then I remembered my friend Jerry, who died because he was too embarrassed to get a prostate exam. I decided I wasn't going to make the same mistake. When I went to Dr. Johnson, he explained something very interesting. He said that when we're sad, anxious, or stressed, our whole body suffers. It's like a car when the driver is nervous. Even the steering gets heavier, the engine works harder. He taught me that knowing our body is fundamental. It's like I always knew with cars in the workshop. The more you know the engine, the quicker you notice when something's wrong. It's the same with the body. The more we know ourselves, the easier it is to identify when something isn't right. He also told me that many men have health problems because they hold in a lot of tension. "Mr. Tom," he said, "you need to release this pressure from time to time. It's like the escape valve on an engine. If you don't release the steam, the pot explodes." One thing that surprised me was when he talked about self-esteem. At my age, I thought that was a young person's thing. But he explained that when we take care of ourselves, when we keep everything working properly, we feel better, more confident. It's true. After I started taking better care of my health, even my mood improved. I started attending a senior group at the health center. There I met Mrs. Sarah, who is now my companion. Our relationship is different from the ones I had before. There's more dialogue, more understanding. We talk about everything, including health, without any shame. The interesting thing is that when we're good in the head, the body also improves. It's like a well-aligned car. Everything works better, uses less energy, performs better. I learned that it's no use just taking medicine if your head isn't right, and it's no use just taking care of your head if your body is abandoned. That's why I always tell my friends, taking care of your health is like tending a garden. It needs attention every day. And it's not just medicine, it's affection, it's attention, it's knowledge about yourself. My friends, after everything I've learned over these years, I want to share with you some practical tips that make all the difference. They're simple things, but I learned in practice that they really work. First, let's talk about regular activity. As we've talked about before, it's important to keep everything functioning. Whether with your partner or alone, the important thing is not to let the machine stay idle. It's like my old '67 Beetle that I still have. Every Sunday I take it for a spin around the block, even if I don't need to. Why? Because I know that a parked car causes problems. Now, something that took me a while to learn but made a huge difference: diet. I remember when the nutritionist at the health center explained to me about foods that help the prostate. At first I turned up my nose. I wanted to continue with my daily bacon. But you know what? She was right. I started eating more red fruits, blackberries, strawberries, that kind of thing. My garden now has kale, spinach, lots of dark green vegetables. The nutritionist said these have something called antioxidants, which are like a special oil for our body's engine. I even planted a pomegranate tree, which they say is very good for the prostate. Water. Don't even get me started. Before I barely drank water, thought coffee and beer were enough. But I learned that water is fundamental. It's like the coolant in a car, it always has to be up to date. Now I carry my water bottle everywhere. Exercises also make a huge difference. I started with light walks, 3 times a week. Then I joined the senior water aerobics class. At first I was embarrassed, I was the only man in the class. Today I never miss a lesson. As the teacher says, "Mr. Tom, an idle body rusts." I also learned some special exercises called Kegel exercises. They're exercises we do by squeezing those muscles we use to hold in pee. At first I thought it was strange, but it's like doing weightlifting for the prostate. I do it every day while watching TV. Nobody even notices. A very important thing Dr. Johnson taught me is about hygiene. Hand washing is fundamental. As I tell my grandchildren, clean hands, healthy body. This applies to everything in life, especially when we're going to touch ourselves. And then there are the checkups too. In the old days, I only went to the doctor when I was dying. Today I make sure to get my exams regularly. I get blood drawn to check the PSA, that test that measures how the prostate is doing. I do the digital exam. Yes, that one everyone's afraid of. At first I was too, but it's quick and can save our lives. Stress is another villain to health. After I retired, I thought I was going to be more relaxed, but life always finds a way to bring worry. I started taking some breathing and meditation classes at the health center. Friends laughed at first, but after they saw how much more energetic I was, some even started going too. And you know what else? I stopped worrying about what others think. If I need to go to the bathroom more often, I go. If I need to talk about prostate health, I talk. Better to be a little embarrassed than to have a big problem later. As I always say, our health is like a savings account. You have to invest a little bit every day to have it in the future. My dear friends, we've come to the end of our conversation, and I want to speak from the heart about something very important: how to deal with our fears and embarrassments when it comes to intimate health. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in a circle of friends at the retirees club, playing dominoes as usual, when Mr. Frank started complaining about pain. Everyone got quiet. Nobody wanted to touch the subject. That's when I decided to open up and tell my own story. "Frank," I said, "I went through this too. I was embarrassed, didn't want to talk about it." You know where that embarrassment led me? Straight to the ICU with an infection that could have been avoided. The silence at the table was broken. Suddenly everyone started telling their story. Tony talked about problems with an enlarged prostate. Charlie said he was afraid to get the digital exam. It was as if we had opened a floodgate. That afternoon, our domino game turned into a discussion circle about men's health. And you know what's most interesting? The following week, half of those men had scheduled an appointment with the urologist. My current companion, Sarah, always says that men have a habit of making a mountain out of a molehill. Tom, she says, you men are afraid of doctors, but you're not afraid to climb a wobbly ladder to change a light bulb. And you know what? She's right. After I started talking openly about these issues, I noticed an interesting change. My children started taking better care of themselves. My grandchildren, well, they're growing up with a different mindset. The other day, my 15-year-old grandson asked me about men's health. I was so proud. In my day, I would never have had the courage to talk about this with my grandfather. And there's one more thing I want to share with you. When we take care of ourselves, when we face these taboos, life becomes lighter. The relationship with your companion improves because there's no weight of the unsaid, the hidden. The relationship with children becomes more open, more sincere. As my daughter, who's a teacher, says, "Dad, you've become a digital influencer for seniors." She jokes like that because now I have a WhatsApp group where I share information about men's health with my friends. It started with 5 people. Today it has more than 50. The truth is, reaching 73 years old, I learned that there's no such thing as man stuff or woman stuff. There's health, there's quality of life. The rest is nonsense. So, my friends, I end this conversation of ours with a request. Don't let fear or shame prevent you from taking care of yourselves. Every time you overcome one of these taboos, you open the way for other men to do the same. As I always say in my talks at the health clinic, yes, I give talks now. Life is too precious to be wasted being ashamed of taking care of yourself. And so, my friends, I conclude this story, hoping that it helps you as much as living and learning each of these lessons has helped me. Take care of yourselves, talk about health, and never forget, there's nothing braver than a man who isn't afraid to take care of himself.